Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm actually calling you all from Oxford, Mississippi, where I spent a few days speaking on solitary confinement and the role of institutions in trying to understand special housing units among racial ethnic minorities. But today I'll be speaking on how to sustain grassroots coalitions, and I'll speak primarily on some of my fieldwork experience with the Bronx Reentry Working Group, and I'll talk some more about what the Bronx Reentry Working Group is. So I'd like to move to the second slide, and for some reason I am having some trouble doing that. Thank you. So the purpose of the learning objectives of the webinar are: we want to understand, or I'll give you some understanding of how to develop solid coalition infrastructures without external funding. And the second goal is to understand the principles of collaboration and volunteerism influencing and maintaining coalition partners. And the reason why I focus on developing coalition infrastructure without external funding is that most of the work that I do in a lot of the grassroots coalitions that partner with me have very difficult opportunities or chances in gaining or securing federal funding. And so we want to make sure that even without federal funding, we can still sustain our project. So let's start with trying to understand what is a coalition. A coalition is a group of individuals, organizations that share a common interest, who agree to work together toward a common goal. And the key to this slide is having a common goal and having a common shared interest. And why do we need to form a coalition? There are several reasons to decide to form a coalition. For example, an agency wants to understand an urgent issue. In the work that I do, we try to understand prisoner reentry, and so that happens to be a serious problem in a number of the neighborhoods that I work with. So for us, that is an urgent issue. The other one is to empower a community, especially communities that have very little resources to mobilize, have very little capacity, social capital, human capital. So that is another reason why it's important to form a coalition. The third reason is to increase community resources. When you form a coalition, you partner with multiple organizations and agencies, and this is a way to strengthen your social capital in many different sectors. For example, if you have a need to develop skills in grant writing and you partner with an agency that has written several grants, this is a way to develop those resources. The fourth reason is to provide social health services to vulnerable or underserved populations. One of the key things we found in Bronx County was that there was very little services for individuals aside from Osborne Association, which is our largest reentry program, to help individuals returning from New York State Correctional Facility into the Bronx. And so a number of the organizations decided to come together to form a coalition to provide social and health services, and they became a referral feeding program for the men and women who are returning from extensive criminal justice use. The other and most important thing is to eliminate unnecessary duplication and increase efficient service delivery. It's amazing when organizations who work in the same population, and this is an ability for them to actually try new avenues, so this decreases duplication. So what are the strengths of the coalition? The strengths include you share similar values, interests, and goals. You begin to understand that Organization A, who happens to work in a food pantry, actually share the same population, the same interest in decreasing poverty. You combine resources or you share resources, which is you're beginning to collect and identify the different resources that are available because you've partnered and you've developed this collaboration with different agencies. And you also begin to support each other collectively to address an issue or problem. And that is one of the major things that is very, very critical for a coalition is you begin to really help each other mobilize that issue, whatever that issue might be, and to focus on that different partners and to understand that not one agency can really solve a problem. It's multiple agencies coming together to address that issue. And the last one is to learn and acquire new skills. And like I said before, if one agency is lacking an understanding or developing grant writing, you can partner with many different agencies that actually have that as a research platform. And this is a good way of acquiring new skills, acquiring new opportunities to develop new areas of funding. And so how do you build a coalition? There are many different ways of building an organization, but I feel like this list that I have in front of you actually illustrates some of the different perspectives and ideas in building a coalition. The key is, you want to determine what the issue is and that whether that's, trying to eliminate obesity or trying to eliminate, recidivism in your area. You want to make sure that, that program that you're trying to create has an understanding of multiple perspectives, and that's a coalition actually allows you to think in many different ways, interdisciplinary, and also in different areas of reentry. It's not just people returning from prison. It's also looking at housing needs, food options for people coming to release, and also examining, the need for shelter and need for transportation. So a coalition actually is able to understand that that problem requires multiple ideas and multiple ways of approaching one major problem. The other key is you want to make sure you recruit the right people. And the way to do this is to really get to know your community, get to know who is going to be your partners and who's willing to really do some volunteer time, because this type of coalition building really takes a lot of work. So recruiting the right people, and that's really through your social network, it's through your partners that you already have cultivated over the years. That will help you identify the right person or the right individuals to form a coalition. The third is to develop a group identity. When you bring multiple perspectives together, multiple agencies, now it's time to develop a group identity. And the way to do that is develop a mission statement. So what does this coalition stand for? How are we different from other coalitions that stand for the same cause? And this is a series of meetings. These are a series of conversations that you have, not just one session, but multiple sessions, trying to understand really why the coalition was formed and what the needs are to address the problem or to alleviate the issue, but also to understand, what are the skills and resources and the capacities that each individual brings to the coalition. When you develop your mission statement, now you want to start thinking about the list of activities. And, the key of having these lists of activities is to develop a plan, a short-term plan, a mid-range plan, and a long-term plan. And you want to be able to, in the very early on of a coalition, to have winnable activities. And, for example, and also something that people can rally on. So, for the work that I do, the very first thing we wanted to do is to have a community forum, and this is an activity that everyone really felt that was feasible for them, and we had the number of individuals that actually went ahead and provided that support. And so from that winnable activity, then we began to think about what other activities we can pursue. And so these should be conversation that you have when you're developing your mission statement is, what do we stand for? what are our goals, what are our objectives, what are our activities, and how do we accomplish these activities? Because having winnable activities actually keeps the momentum of the coalition, and it keeps the excitement. You want to make sure that you build consistent enthusiasm, because over time you'll see that without winnable activities, you'll lose some of your members. The other important sort of ingredient to develop a coalition or to build one is to determine the level of commitment, trust, and resources. And that is, when you recruit the right people, those individuals have already stated their commitment, and they trust the coalition, and they have the resource to actually help the coalition, continue and build for future work. And so, but there are some that are interested and motivated but might not have that capacity. So you want to make sure through open dialogue, have these conversations about, how many hours can you devote a week? What is your level of commitment? Is this something you want to do for 6 months? Is this a project you're interested in for the long term? And trust, building trust is really critical, making sure that the sessions have the built and and foster trust. Sometimes people might share something that is confidential, and just keeping note that through these meetings that these sharings are confidential. And then you want to understand what the resources are, and when you recruit these individuals. And the other thing is maintain vitality, which is what I said earlier, is by having a list of activities, by having a list of goals and objectives and plans, you maintain that enthusiasm over the long haul. Because you can have a coalition for just 6 months duration, or 9 months, or even for a year, but to sustain a coalition for the long term, you want to have these ingredients in place. And the other key is, you want to make sure that you have shared responsibilities. Is that you'll have a co-chair, a co-founder, or a facilitator, but that role ought to be shared amongst each other and amongst all the coalition members. So, for example, even though I'm the co-chair or the co-founder, I've been fortunate enough to actually share that responsibility, share that leadership role amongst the other coalition members. And most importantly is to develop a sustainability plan. And one of the key things that I've seen in coalitions is that they lack the forethought to think about how to sustain this. Sometimes when we go into a coalition, it is because we're trying to secure funding, or the other reason is that there's such a need, and then once that need is addressed, then the coalition dissipates. And it really will depend on the conversation that you have with the different coalition members. But if a coalition is to sustain itself, there has to be a plan, and that conversation should happen earlier on during the conversations about mission statement, conversations about list of activities, because the key is, having sustainability and having an evaluation of, how to sustain these things really keeps the momentum, it keeps the energy, or the members energized. But also over the years, you'll see that you'll be able to bring new members when your former coalition members want to retire, want to move on to a different topic or a different issue. You can easily bring in new members, and that's the key, is to have a sustainability plan, and doing the early on conversations with the group. So how does one form a coalition? I mentioned earlier about having a chairperson or co-chair. That individuals are primary responsible and serves as a spokesperson for the coalition. So he or she is responsible for setting up the meeting, for locating a meeting space, for having an agenda. He or she also, works with the facilitator. The facilitator could also be the chairperson, but this person is responsible for running the coalition meetings. He or she is responsible for resolving disagreements. And then you have these individual volunteers, which is these individuals don't represent an agency. They could be your community members, such as the residents that live in the community, or these individuals have been impacted directly by the issue that you're focusing on. majority of the individuals that are part of the Bronx Entry Working Group are actually individuals who have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system. And so having the volunteers or individuals as part of your group really helps to keep the enthusiasm and momentum of the coalition. And because they're able to share personal experience with the issue, they can also help, consider different types of options, like solve the problem because they have more to lose or have more of a weight and understand exactly how to resolve the issue because they've been impacted by it directly. And then an agency these are individuals who represent an agency. So, for example, I represent an institution, and then a number of coalition members will also represent an agency. So you want to have a diverse set of coalition members weighted on all of these different factors, having agency representatives, having individuals, having volunteers, also nominate a co-chair, a co-facilitator, and forming this coalition, you want that the key is to make sure that you have a mix of these different individuals, and that the volunteers are also willing to serve as a co-facilitator in the future, and the co-chair is not just part of an agency, but is also part of the a volunteer, for example. So as part of the Bronx Entry Working Group, I serve as the co-chair, and my other co-chair is he represents an agency, but also has been impacted by the criminal justice system, so he wears both hats. So what are the principles of a coalition? And I mentioned this in a previous slide. So the very key thing is you want to lay the foundation, and the foundation is really, building the trust, not trust, I apologize for that. So foster trust, meaning that, building trust takes it may take some time. So the key is to, ask people to share some of their personal stories or share some of their agency stories. And it's important for individuals to feel safe while they're doing so. Building community, that means spending a lot of time in the community, getting to know who the community residents are, figuring out who the gate leaders are in the community, so that's a very key. The other aspect is, oftentimes we're going to agree to a lot of issues, but we're also going to disagree, and it's okay. Like I told my coalition members, we're all friends here, and so it's okay that, I don't agree with something that and making sure everyone is on board on making that activity actually happen. And then the collective action is really bringing everyone, involved in all of the activities that you also are interested in pursuing. Engaging all members, so you want to engage even the quiet members just to, ask them if they have any ideas, interests, or volunteer on an activity. So making sure that you have a collective stance on the issue. And even the quiet members, you want to also see how eager they are in trying to solve that problem and make sure that they're engaged as well. The other aspect is, like I said earlier, it's important to focus on your activities, so focus on achieving results. So be persistent on the cause. Make sure you have, make sure you have the networks that you need. And the key is, transparency. And the way we do that is, at the meeting, we take minutes. We have we don't have a designated secretary, but someone from the members actually take notes, and those minutes are emailed or shared during the meeting or prior to the meeting. And we have open conversation about those minutes, and if somebody has a comment or doesn't agree on a topic or what was said, then we make sure that we address that prior to starting a new meeting. All of the members are networked into different agencies, so we can easily call into another agency who can support us in a different cause. And then the key is, you want to make sure you document everything that you've done so far, because the key to, a coalition is to have the documentation in place, because as a co-chair, I'm not going to be co-chair forever, but we want to have the documentation in place so other members of the group can step up and see the progression of the group. So we share, all of us share a Dropbox, and in that Dropbox includes the minutes, the agenda of the meeting, the evaluation. We evaluate each activity. And then it also includes all of the programs that we've created, the community forum, and all the other work that we've done. And the other thing that we've been able to do, and I'll share this in a little while, is to develop a website that is sort of the directory of all the different partners that have been involved with us. So that really, having all of that creates the transparency that you need. So, and it also fosters the trust, it builds community, and then members can see the progression of this. It's not just a one, we want to address recidivism in 2013, but then, and then end there. We want to address recidivism and health issues for the long term. And so achieving these results and achieving these type of activities to create these results really fosters the collective action that you need to continue the coalition when the chairperson decides to step down or decides to nominate someone else. So what is the size of a coalition? It varies from coalition to coalition. Some coalitions have 6 to 8 members. There's not really an appropriate size and capacity. It really depends on the capabilities of the chairperson, the facilitator to manage some of the everyday nuances of a coalition. For example, in the work that I do, we have 20 to 25 members that come to our meetings on a bi-monthly basis, and overall we have 86 coalition members. Not all 86 actually show up on a regular time, but when we host a community forum in the Bronx, we were able to tap into our resources to our members to promote some of the work that we do and also to facilitate those sessions. So it really just depends on who the chairperson is and how active you want to be, how involved. I know coalition members right now that are also part of different coalition members, and their partners are, their group are small because that's just the kind of work that they want to do. They want to focus on small coalitions. But then there are other coalitions that have 30,000 members, and they're regional, they're national, and so forth. So it just depends on the early conversations that you have with your coalition members. We started off with 5 people, all from different agencies, and we are now, up to 86 members. So it really just depends on the level of capacity, the level of interest, and for us, the interest around criminal justice and recidivism is pretty prominent in the Bronx, and so our members keep growing. So what are the challenges of coalition building? I have to say that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of time. It is very time-consuming to develop these relationships, develop these friendships, develop these connections, to have face-to-face time with individuals when you have very little resources, when it's not part of a job description. So if this was a part of a job description to develop a coalition, then it would be part of your day-to-day activities. But for the work that I do, this is not part of my day-to-day job description. So this is outside of my work hours. So it's really time-consuming. It's also time-consuming to foster trust, to continuously encourage the coalition members to keep at it, even though the issues are difficult, to motivate individuals to keep coming back. So it's a lot of work, and to also the sharing of workload too, because given the capacities of the individual, it may be difficult due to resources, lack of resources, or just lack of having a computer at home to be able to type up the minutes and so forth. So we used to get, when we had one of our residents actually write up the minutes, they would just give it to us by paper, and then someone else would actually have to type that up. And and not only email it to everyone, but also mail the minutes, because some of our members don't have computers. And the only way they have access to is to anything electronic is by the by using the library, or if through a smartphone. And the other issue is but time and time you'll have conflicts inside the group and within the group. And so, that takes a lot of time also to build, again, to continue to build that trust and to figure out what the conflicts are, to figure out how to resolve those conflicts. And that takes time as well. Also, there might be a new member that, that have their own hidden agenda. So what does that really mean for the group? And when is that, we had an issue with this when it surfaced later on that a new member was a correction officer and didn't disclose it. So that was something that the coalition had to really figure out is, should we have a new member who is a correction officer, or should we maintain this group as a group of non-police officers? So again, we had to have that conversation from at that meeting. And then also the skills and resources. So, you might have individuals who do not have the skills, or lack the skills that you're looking for, or lack the resources, and that are coming to the coalition actually to build those skills and resources. And the key is to find coalition members that are willing to train that person in how to use the computer or how to use email. So these are the kind of challenges that we're experiencing as we continue to grow. And then, the other thing is, having conflicting priorities. And is this a task force? Is this a coalition? If it's not a task force, then so these are conversations that you'll have. And every member, because as the group continues to grow, will have different priorities. And the other one is poor decision making. But the way to resolve these challenges is to, early on when you're developing, you're thinking about forming a coalition, is to have these issues already in the foreground, meaning that, what are the list of activities you want to complete or be successful at? How do you share the workload? What are the, and identifying the skills and resources of each person. So we actually had a human capital list of individuals. So, looked at everyone's skills and resources. So it's not a surprise when someone is coming to the meeting and needing help in how to use the computer. We actually already have someone who is willing to provide those resources. And the key to resolve these conflicts and priorities is to go back to your mission statement, is to go back to these activities. And these activities can change over time, but you want to make sure that you have accomplished activities. Because if you have these activities in place, even if a new member comes in has a different priority, you still have those listed priorities that you're trying to accomplish. And over time, you can create new priorities for the collective. So now I'm going to discuss the Bronx Rancho Group, which I used in several instances to describe the coalition. So the coalition at one point were based on focusing on the community organizations, the frontline workers, and just this past few weeks, we've decided that now we want to focus on returning citizens, which are those that are coming home from state prison and city jail and returning to the Bronx, their friends and family members to support each other through community reintegration. So Bronx Rancho Working Group is a coalition of returning citizens, friends, and family members supporting each other through community reintegration. And Marita earlier on described the Bronx Rancho Working Group, and we just changed our mission statement, so this is our new mission statement. And so this group has over 80 members. Half of them are actually returning citizens, and the returning citizen was coined not by me as the co-chair, but actually the members came together and were uncomfortable with the term ex-con, formerly incarcerated, ex-offender, and so forth, and alluded to the fact that they are still citizens, but they're returning to the community. So this is a term that they coined as a group, and we've been using that term throughout the work that we're doing. So So this is the structure of the Bronx Reentry Working Group, and you can go to the website, and it'll explain to you what the structure looks like. So I'm the co-chair. Ramon Samarelli is the crew supervisor, who also is employed at Bronx Community Solutions. And I had mentioned that the community forum. This is the community forum that we implemented in 2010, and we are starting to basically consider whether we'll have a forum this in June. So this is where the planning stage. And so the community forum is a one-day forum for individuals who are returning from state prison and city jails. And all of the coalition members who are part of an agency or involved in an agency come to the meeting, and we have different sessions. For example, we have the session on Know Your Rights. We have a session on, how to deal with parole, how to deal with probation. We also have a parole officer talking about issues around supervision. We have a time management session. We have a session on successful reentry. So this is a one-day community forum in the Bronx where we bring Bronx residents who have a criminal justice background to meet with organizations that are part of our coalition to discuss these issues related to reentry. And all of our members, all of our organizations spend that one day really linking our returning citizens to their agency, so their services are met. And we work with the regional director of parole in the Bronx. She does our welcoming, and she also encourages her parolees to attend this meeting. So we, over the years we've had, the first meeting was very new. The Bronx wasn't really familiar with this type of setting. Usually when we think about a conference or even a workshop, we usually tend to bring only organizations and interested individuals. We decided to bring a workshop or a conference to the individuals that are directly impacted by this. So our first community forum was held in 2010. We had about 50 members. In 2011, we had 60 members. In 2012, we had 70 members attend. And in 2013, we had overwhelmingly about 115 people attend the meeting, and many of these people were coming from all parts of the Bronx. The other group that the coalition members wanted to implement was a support group. So Cary Grant and Ramon, we decided to develop a support group, and we're now at the stage where many members from different parts of the southern boroughs have decided to take this model and develop their own reentry group. So in the fall, we're developing steps to reentry, and so the goal is every member who is not from the Bronx will actually develop a reentry anonymous group. And so we will have one in East Harlem, we'll have one in the Queens, we'll actually have a couple of reentry anonymous groups in Westchester, the Bronx, and also in Manhattan. And so all of the 15 to 20 people that come to the reentry, to the support group, have committed to host their own support group all over New York City. And I have to say the docs, community supervision and corrections, are really excited about this because we're having an influx of individuals returning to our communities due to the closing of prisons, and the problems around reintegration is really challenging for many people who have had extensive criminal justice histories. The last group is a research subcommittee, and this is basically using community-based participatory methods to understand the challenges of reentry in the Bronx related to health outcomes. So I serve on that committee, and a number of Mailman School of Public Health practicum students also serve on that committee, and we've been able to publish some of the work related to health outcomes. So this is the structure. This is the structure of the Bronx Reentry Working Group, and all of the members are volunteers. We've decided to maintain a volunteer-based coalition, because we knew that if we infuse or try to secure funding, once that funding is, either eliminated or no longer available, then the group will also, it'll be challenges to keep the group momentum. So we've never had funding to do the work that we're doing now. It's really because of the commitment of the partners and the organizations. Are volunteers, and half of the volunteers are returning citizens, and they are invested and have been impacted by this issue, so they keep the program going. And it's also through the work that the students have done at Columbia and also at Albert Einstein that we've been able to maintain the research subgroup. So we are planning the community forum in the summer, late summer, and again, I've become the cheerleader of the group. I try to find space for people to meet, and yes, I serve as the chairperson or the ownership of the group, and as a chairperson, as someone who co-founded this, that was my vision, is to eventually step out of my role and have the group really run and facilitate these groups, because as I said to you, it's very time consuming. It takes a lot of my energy, and I'm tired, and so now I'm ready to pass the torch to someone else. So, like I said, we have it's a volunteer-based coalition. It was developed in 2010 by 5 members. So 5 of us got together and said, there's this problem around reentry, and we're seeing more people coming home in the Bronx. Why is that? And this was just the early stages of the governor's decision to close prisons and send people to the Bronx. And now we have currently over 80 active Bronx members, including policymakers also as part of that, physicians, formerly incarcerated individuals, frontline workers, parole officers, among others. And so we reach out to our policymakers when there's didn't have access to their medical records upon release. So we worked with Senator Gustavo Rivera and others to really understand that and to put forth, the conversation of we need to make sure people have access to their records upon release, so they're not having to so doctors are not having to reinvent the wheel when people come home. We also work very closely with parole officers because our meetings are in the evening. It's from 6 to 7:30 in the evening, and a lot of the men have curfews, and they have to be home by a certain time, like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And so we work with their parole officers to give them permission to attend the evening meetings. Frontline workers are individuals who have been impacted by the system and are now working in agencies that support reentry. And so these frontline workers have been helpful in helping the individuals from our group find employment. And of course, we have returning citizens or formerly incarcerated individuals, and these are the individuals who come to our meetings twice a month who discuss their issues, and then that's how we've been able to set priority areas. So, we decided that a community forum would be an investment for the individuals coming home. Our co-chair is also invested in support groups, so they've decided to ensure that we have a support group for people that are just newly released. And the goal is to sustain, and all of these efforts are sustained by formerly incarcerated individuals because they know what's best and how to help each other, because that's something that they've been doing while they were incarcerated. And it's really fascinating to be with a group of men and women and know that they've actually shared histories while they were incarcerated. And it's like coming home to a new group, but the group isn't new. It's just an extension of what they've had prior to release. We meet at the criminal court building. So the criminal court building has given us space we can use at any given time. And I've also been really fortunate to have a relationship with our bureau president in the Bronx, so he's given us space as well to hold our meetings. So again, this took a lot of time and effort, and as a collective, we've been able to continue to move issues. We work with the Bronx Bureau President's Office. We work with the District Attorney's Office. We work very closely with public defenders. They are the agency we go to when we need a session on Know Your Rights. We have a great relationship with the state legislators, Bronx probation, parole, Samaritan Village. A number of our returning citizens actually work at Samaritan Village. Recovery services, again, institutions like Albert Einstein have been very critical with this work. We work very closely with physicians if people need health care services. We refer them to Montefiore, Lehman College. We have attorneys on board. Most of these members don't come to our coalition meetings because that's really centered around, helping returning citizens and their families really try to understand the mechanisms of reentry. But when we host the community forum, all of the members on this list are part of that. So they are involved in the planning, the implementation, the evaluation of our community forum. So the objectives, like earlier on we discussed objectives. So these are objectives to improve the health and well-being of returning citizens by providing appropriate supports and service referrals, to increase skills and knowledge of returning citizens through programming, education, and advocacy strategies, to increase information sharing and exchange, to expand community engagement, and foster relations within and between coalition members and returning citizens. And so now I'm going to illustrate how we've been able to achieve these objectives. So the first objective, to improve the health and well-being of returning citizens by providing appropriate supports and service referrals. So I've listed here a number of our accomplishments. The major accomplishment that we were able to succeed at is because our Bronx Reentry Working Group is the only reentry working group in New York City, we were able to receive funding from the state government to bring a Bronx County task force. So that funding, I was able to work with the state government to bring funding to the county to implement a reentry task force. And what that is that a lot of our coalition partners attend those meetings, and they address the policy issues related to reentry in the Bronx. And they have a case management program as well for those that are high risk, level 1, level 2 cases who are returning to the Bronx. And these clients of the Bronx County Task Force come to our support group to address, understand reentry, and also navigating just returning to the Bronx. And what we're finding is that many of the people that are coming home to the Bronx are actually not residents from the Bronx. They're actually residents from different neighborhoods. And so being mandated to come to live in the Bronx is very new for them, since they were never residents of the Bronx in the first place. So these are some of the issues that we found in the work that we're doing. We also facilitate healthy eating or health eating seminars. And what that is that, when you're incarcerated, your meals are provided for you, and you don't really have to think about what you're eating except when you decide to go to the commissary and buy snacks. So when people are released, the very first thing they do is they enjoy the options and food that we have. But the problem with that is they're not given a lot of money to actually spend on these type of food. So we talk about having a balanced diet, how to spend less than what spending less on food. We also talk about food options and food availability, and using just your limited resources to actually have a three times a day meal. So we have some of that. We also provide financial literacy courses with our criminal court building. Now, the reason why we do this is that we want to make sure that people who are receiving, entitlements, also, for their first paycheck, know how to spend and save their money wisely. And so, our task force, one of our task force members, actually, developed a basic financial literacy 101 class, and actually holds these courses at the Bronx Criminal Court building, and he serves the Bronx group individuals there. So that's really important for us to include both health eating and also financial literacy, because these are the two major problems that people experience when they come home. And then we teach anger management and mental health. One of my former students developed a basic 101 mental health and sort of overlapped that with anger management. And so we're invited to teach anger management to mental health basics to mandated anger management individuals in the partners that we work with. So that's another accomplishment. And the other accomplishment is that several of our members have become a bridge between the correction facilities and inmates to the Bronx. So when someone is returning from a minimum correction facility and they're coming home to the Bronx, our members are called and said, "Can you help us with the reentry piece?" So so many of our members have become the link of that. And so, for example, we invite them to the support group meetings. They're linked up to agencies, and they immediately get the support that they need. So, objective 2, we wanted to increase skills and knowledge of returning citizens through programming, education, and advocacy. So we maintain a listserv for current and active coalition members, and what we do is people that are, involved in all kinds of activism, we share that information to our group, and the individuals decide to attend or participate in activism related to criminal justice work in New York City. And it's a very active group. We also disseminate information materials related to education. So if there's a new GED class forming in the Bronx, we distribute that. I always get calls about computer classes, so I make sure that I update the listserv on computer classes. And, if there's any conferences that might be of interest to the group, or seminars, this gets disseminated to the listserv. And like I said, we facilitate a coalition reentry community forum in the Bronx. So those are accomplishments for Objective 2. Now for Objective 3, we wanted to increase information sharing and exchange. And what this is that we have a website, you can go Google it, Bronx Reentry, that includes a resource directory of agencies that support reentry, that actually serve returning citizens in the Bronx. It's a laundry list of individuals and agencies. We're now developing the 12 steps to successful reentry, which is how do you successfully reintegrate to the community using the AA, Alcohol Anonymous, Narcotic Anonymous model. And we're now in step 10. Tomorrow the group will meet, and we'll finish step 11 and 12, and then we'll meet again to discuss all the steps, and we'll develop a guidebook. So each member have already committed to finding a location, finding a meeting space, and holding spaces for people that are coming home and from New York correctional facilities. So what are our lessons? So, after 4 years of developing this coalition, understanding the mission, creating priorities, these are what are the lessons that we've learned from the Bronx Reentry Working Group. I have to say that the key for me is keep your goals focused. Is that there's so much opportunities in New York City. You can develop coalitions for everything and for anything, but we decided to keep the Bronx County in mind, that all the work that we do is focused on the Bronx. So it's reentry and the Bronx, it's community health in the Bronx, and it's for individuals who are returning to the Bronx. So I wanted, and as all of the members decided, is that, the Bronx, when we think about the Bronx, we don't have really good, statistics of the Bronx, and we just think about the poverty and all the issues related to health. So we wanted to bring these resources and the capacities back to the Bronx. And the other, as you can see, collaborate with diverse members. I collaborate with police officers. I collaborate with probation officers, because even though they might be considered, by a formerly incarcerated person as the enemy, but for us, they're allies, because they can continuously help us push the envelope forward. So when people are visiting the criminal court building, because that's where we hold our spaces, the individuals who enter that building get frightened, because that's a traumatic event for them, for many of them. But our police officers understand that we have these meetings, and so the process is very smooth, and the process of getting them, past the monitoring and so forth is not as traumatic as it was for them in the past. Locate champions, we're always, highlighting the work of our returning citizens. If one returning citizen was offered a position, their birthdays, we celebrate the months even, or the years that they've been back to the Bronx. We spend, a number of us also spend a lot of time with our policymakers to just keep them up to date on what's going on. We give them flyers. We invite them to our open meetings. We also cultivate a relationship with the residents, because the residents are also invested in this. So we make sure that, residents are involved in this engaging of reentry. And then the key is be creative. So creativity. So we have a toiletry event where at the end of the year I collect toiletries for people living in halfway housing or transitional housing, and I go, I've done this for a few years, where I ask my friends, my academic institution, to donate, unused toiletries that we have when we travel. We just collect them, so I ask them to donate that to these respective individuals. And then the key for me is just secure in-kind support, meaning that, since we made a decision not to secure federal funding or state funding, because many of us don't have that capacity to do that, we've been able to secure in-kind support from our coalition members. For example, we have an agency that when we have the community forum, that agency gives us Metro cards for people that are, that don't have a way to get back to their respective neighborhoods. We also have an agency that, that gives us the meeting space and donates food. So this in-kind support really helps keep the excitement, the momentum, and it continues the mission of the group, which is to focus on reentry of the Bronx. So we get a lot of in-kind support from a lot of our coalition members, and also from individuals, from graduate students who benefited from this work by being able to secure a lucrative employment, because they've been able to not only just publish a paper, but also have worked with a diverse community, have been involved in the coalition building and developing, agendas and so forth. So the students that I've been able to train get a flavor of this, and then are able to launch later as they graduate from the MPH program or the PhD program. So these are additional resources, and I think I'm almost out of time. So I think I'll end here, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Valera. I'm going to unmute all of the conference lines now, so please feel free to either type a question in the chat box or just go ahead and you can say your question.
The conference is now in talk mode.
So if there are any questions, please go ahead and you can speak up now.
Everyone should be able to speak. If you would like to ask a question, we'll wait for a couple of minutes. If we don't hear from anyone or we don't see anybody writing a question in the chat, we'll end the conference. So please ask your questions.
Okay, good afternoon. I have a question. I've been part of a coalition where some people on the group do a lot of the work. An institution for example, will be doing maybe 80% of the work and some other members just aren't as involved. So what would you do to encourage their involvement and participation?
I think that's a very good question, and we had that. We've had similar issues in the very beginning, and I think the key is to have these private conversations with individuals who are not as involved and ask them, is there anything that you can do to increase engagement? And perhaps it's just having that honest conversation and say, so-and-so has done most of the work, and I really appreciate you coming to the meeting, but is there anything I can do? So take, keep the onus on you. So is there anything I can do to keep, to help you stay engaged? What can I do? So that's the key, is having those conversations, and a private one too, because you don't want to, embarrass groups of individuals and say, okay, well, this group isn't participating, but maybe having a coffee. So I always, when there's someone who's not as engaged, I try to invite them for coffee and say, let's just have a chat and see where things are, and are you happy with the group? Is there anything that I can do to, keep your interest? What's missing? And then that conversation really gives you the opportunity to listen to what he or she needs, and also helps you to be a better facilitator.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are any other questions, feel free to speak up now or type a question in the chat box.
Hi, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
When selecting members for the coalition, I understand that skill set is important, but I understand that, just as the previous question, that interest and availability is also of concern. So I know you mentioned a list of human capital skills. So should the coalition consider the skills of new members first, or the availability of new members first?
I think a coalition should, as it's forming, consider both. Because, for example, like with the coalition that I work with, we had a lot of people interested and available, but then lacked the skills to actually use basic technology. And so you want to have a mix of individuals who are able to be interested and be available to participate, but also require the skills, because this does take skills to manage. So, but if you have different people in many different settings in terms of their human capital, then you're able to sort of like mitigate that better. I don't think it's either or. You're welcome. I think it's both.
I have a question.
Okay.
The question is, how do you get take for instance, a coalition or a group does meet to have attend to an issue? Take, for instance, you're talking about an event, but to have an evaluation of whatever that they've done, or evaluation as to what processes worked, what didn't work. How do you get a group at the end of whatever it is that objective that should have been met, that probably has not been met, to have that evaluation after, and how important is that after whatever the objectives of that particular coalition should have been?
So evaluation should start from the very beginning, from process evaluation to the very end of the activity for the objective. And so when we accomplish an objective, we have a retreat. Mm-hmm. So it's a half-day retreat to go over our success stories, to go over the challenges, and to go over, next steps. So how can we do this better? And so, for example, with the community forum, I have an evaluation that I distribute at the very end of the community forum to all the members and to the participants that have attended. And I do, a basic evaluation of the program itself and what they would like to see for next year's community forum. But I also do another like questionnaire, like very basic 1 to 10 questions about what people's basic needs are, mm-hmm. because that's very important for us as a coalition to understand that maybe we need to spend a lot of time talking about healthy eating. And that's actually one of the reasons why we decided to include that, is that people were not getting enough nutritious food in the community, and that folks were spending most of their capacity and their resources in fast food options. So that's why we decided to include that. So every time you have an activity, and also when you accomplish an objective, it's good to have an evaluation, whether it's an open dialogue about what goes on, and make sure you have someone taking minutes or ask permission to tape record it, because that really helps you keep thinking ahead and keep thinking about the future. So, when we had our first community forum and the website, all of these were just wonderful accomplishments. I decided, okay, let's have a half-day retreat meeting, and not everybody showed up to the meeting, but the 10 people that did really helped shape how we move forward. So a retreat meeting is critical, evaluation from the very beginning, even when, like an evaluation of your mission statements, because sometimes, as someone said, you'll have individuals that are very quiet or not as engaged, but they are interested. If they keep coming to the meetings, they're very interested. They might just be shy or timid or not be comfortable in public speaking. And so getting that evaluation in a written form is really helpful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are any other questions, please go ahead and ask them now. Dr. Valera, as long as you don't mind spending another minute or two on the phone with us.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
And if you do have a question, I should have been doing this from the beginning. Please say your name and where you work.
I'm sorry, one more question. Janice Blake, New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Thank you for your talk. You mentioned that I heard you say task force, and I heard you say coalition, and I saw on the slide work group. Is there a distinction between any or between those three? And is there time to use one versus the other?
So that's a very good question, and there are slight distinctions between a task force, a working group, and a coalition, which unfortunately I don't have much time to basically go over right today, but I'm happy to send you the materials. But for example, when we started when we started the Bronx Reentry, it was just a working group, which is to bring people together and to talk about issues, and without any, long-term effects of how this is going to happen. And then what happened was the state government said, we really like your working group, let's form a task force, which became part of the state. So the Bronx County Task Force is now affiliated with the state government, and a lot of our community agencies are now part of the task force. And what it is that they're tasked, they're mandated by the state government to address an issue, right? That mandate is related to, reentry in the Bronx. So the state government, they formed these, there's about 14 or 16 now task forces across the state, and they have rules and regulations of how to address this issue. So they're mandated to basically required to have or host monthly meetings to address things related to policy. But with the task force, the difference with the coalition is the coalition decides on the activities and the objectives of the group, versus the task force, someone else, like an overseer, whether that's the community, whether that's the state government, the county, or whatever, or an institution, actually develops those types of mission statements, and the members just decide, the members determines how to carry out those type of activities. So there's a little bit of flexibility there in terms of how to carry out these activities, but the task force objectives are already set by an overseer, versus the coalition is, the group comes together and tries to determine what the objectives are, what the mission statement is, and how do you carry out that mission statement. And then, and then you have the working group, which is, it's like a working group. You bring a few people together, and there's a commitment, but that commitment the commitment is very static, and you may lose you may lose a working group member, and then you may decide that's not that you can dissolve a working group, anytime you want. I feel like a coalition is because because you have a diversity of different people that are involved, it's much more difficult to actually dissolve it, because there's so many different players that are involved in a coalition.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, given the time, I think I'm going to ask that we end the webinar now. Dr. Valera, Would it be okay if we sent out a copy of the slides and perhaps some contact information of yours so people can follow up with other questions?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. So I'll go ahead. I'll be sending out an evaluation form shortly, and I'll include in that email a copy of the slides for your reference and some contact information for Dr. Valera in case there are any other questions about building or maintaining successful coalitions. So Dr. Valera, thank you so much for your time today. That was a great presentation. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and stay tuned for